Good evening. I'd like to start up if we could. Thanks a lot. We'll have some more guests filtering in. But in the meanwhile, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I am Michael Clemens. I study migration and development here at CGD, and I'm delighted to be hosting three incredible people tonight. Michael Camerini and Shari Robertson, who I'm going to introduce in a second. And then after the film clips, we're going to come to Esther Olavarria, who came up from Florida today for this. So we are going to watch three excerpts from this incredible film series, narrated by the filmmakers. That's going to take about 20 minutes. Then I want to have a little discussion because there's a very specific question I want to ask all of our guests right at the end. And then I want to open it up to have at least half an hour of discussion with you guys. And then we are going to have drinks and food, and please feel welcome to stay for that. So why is the Center for Global Development hosting something about immigration reform? Having spent a lot of 2011 going around this town talking about development and immigration, I have personally experienced that these two worlds don't overlap very much. And for those of you who are more in the migration sphere and not so much in the development sphere, especially welcome. I'm an economist who studies the economic effects of migration, and I think that international movement of people in all sorts of very easy to see and some very difficult to see ways is one of the most important forces shaping the world economy, and particularly obvious in certain cases such as Haiti, where we have been involved in some work that I'd like to talk about later, using migration policy as part of the disaster relief effort. And just that sentence is a kind of strange one to utter because in this town especially, combining those two worlds, disaster relief, economic development, and migration policy is not something that happens very often. But that comes to the heart of the importance of the issue for me. And we'll come back to that. First, I want to get to these movies. So the economics of migration are relatively simple. Enormous gains to be had, some winners and some losers. The winners and losers is where it enters the political realm, and that's where things get incredibly complicated. And I was blown away when I saw the 12th movie of this series, How Democracy Works Now, that we're going to be watching parts of. Even if I had no interest in immigration at all, I had never seen any kind of document of the policymaking process in Washington this detailed to the level of literally listening in on individual phone calls, the kind of thing that very few of us have the opportunity to ever do. Just an amazing document of how close and inspiringly close the country actually came not too many years ago to a real bipartisan compromise to move forward on immigration. And it was after seeing that we contacted Michael and Shari and asked them to come talk about this movie. And Esther was very generous to join us. And what I'm going to ask them later, and this is the question I'd really like to plant in your minds also, is what we can learn from this, because this was not that long ago, and it was not that far from success, as bleak as the picture might look right now. And I want to know what lessons we could learn from these clips we're going to see and from the discussion about if there is to be a bipartisan compromise going forward, what might it look like? What's one thing that it might need to incorporate? What's one characteristic that it might definitely need to exclude? First, let's get right to Michael and Shari. So Michael Camerini directs and produces films and documentary series, a long list of which is in front of me. They range from India to the arts, frescoes of Diego Rivera, the struggle to balance religious and cultural identity with mainstream values in the United States. For example, Becoming the Buddha in LA. He says that his filmmaking technique strives to let people tell their own stories, and that a thread running through all of his work, and certainly tonight, is what it means to be a foreigner in many senses. And Shari Robertson, sitting next to Michael, Grew up in Texas and New Mexico, trained in anthropology and ethnographic film. Your filmmaking has taken you to Cambodia, Papua New Guinea, and Peru, among certainly other places. Your work has appeared on BBC, National Geographic, PBS, CNN, HBO, and many other places. And Shari was just telling me that this particular project grew out of discussions surrounding a previous and very noted project of yours, which is Well-Founded Fear, a documentary about the U.S. asylum program. I haven't seen it, but focusing on the U.S. asylum program. Right now we're going to watch 3 different clips, I guess narrated by Shari, right? And Michael will be showing them. And then at the end of which I will invite both of them and Esther to the stage to start a discussion. Thank you very much.
So thank you to the center and to Michael and to all of you for coming to this. A lot of the teachers and heroes of this series are in the room, and you know who you are. We have a lot of people to thank. It really is 12 feature-length documentaries. We started shooting in August of 2001, and we finished in the summer of 2007. And we're still editing some of the middle episodes of this. And we'll show you 3 short segments. So.
The first one we chose is from the next to the last film. It's 2006, and the bill that basically we had been following for the previous 5 years, the bill that was an idea in 2001, has finally incarnated into a piece of legislation that has made it through an amazing 5 or 6 day markup in the Senate and is now on the Senate floor. And it goes through an early near-death experience in the Senate. And the place that our clip begins is as people are working on a solution to whether or not this thing is going to go forward. They're working on a compromise, and Senators Hagel and Martinez have proposed a new idea, a new tweak to the bill that gets through the markup.
We weren't invited to the meeting in Reed's office, and neither was Esther. We stuck around, though, and followed her to Senator Kennedy's hideaway, just down the hall from the Senate floor.
Well, I suppose we could give a brief report on the meeting we had. Reed's point was, we're doing great, hold the line, can't trust them in conference.
They're desperate.
And he implied that Ted Kennedy's more of a legislator and he's focused on the election. I mean, it was pretty clear. But, I mean, he didn't say it all at the same time. But that's what I took away from it.
We don't even have a deal. I mean, Senator Kennedy isn't accepting what they've offered so far. I mean, it's pretty shitty. I mean,
Well, can you explain?
Yeah, tell us why
what it
you
is?
think it's bad, because the description we're getting is of something that seems pretty good. For the people who've been here less than 5 years, it's Corn and Kyle. You know, you waive every single right you ever have. And then what the only difference that they did is they added in there a touch return. And then you come back under a temporary worker program, basically our temporary worker program. But the big problem that Senator Kennedy's having with all of this is that you're filtering him in through a temporary worker program.
So the temporary worker program looks huge.
It becomes a 3 million person temporary worker program. On the Democratic side, we're fighting back. All kinds of people wanting
Stabbing
to
us
kill
in the
that,
world, right.
you know, and Dorgan and Obama even,
Right.
you know, and now we're going to add 3 million more people to it.
Right.
So we've been saying,
That's the
can't we
problem.
make it something else where they
Calling the
have
3 million people in the
something else?
sliver temporary workers is good for Republicans.
Conditional,
It doesn't sound like amnesty.
call it, and they're saying, no, it has to be a
But labor
temporary worker
unions are
program.
fundamentally opposed to competition from temporary workers. Union support is essential for the Democratic Party. And Democratic senators' support is essential for Kennedy to make this deal.
The way the unions are right now going after, a temporary worker program, yeah. So that's the problem, and it's. I haven't even gone through all this kind of detail with the center. I've just told them, the big picture stuff, and that was enough for him to
What do
say.
you think are the meanest pieces?
Well, it's you basically waive every single right to contest anything. There's no administrative or judicial review.
We're getting kind of enthusiastic about the prospect of a deal.
No, I know.
And so, check us if you think that we're being naive.
My sense is that if we want to reach an agreement, there may still be that option on the table. And to do it, it would be with McCain at this point. And so we've got to find a different formulation. And Esther has tried 5 or 6 different ways of doing it.
Well, and can I ask another delicate question? Let's say we do figure this out, and there's a deal struck, say, with McCain, and he kind of shops it, and after back and forth, it's a done deal. Will the Dem leadership be behind Senator Kennedy on it?
I can't answer that.
Yeah, we were getting
There'd
some
be a lot of
pretty-
kicking and screaming, I know. I can't answer that.
And then, Michael, then the other issue is,
If they can't solve this thing, it's going to kill the bill. So the hideaway meeting ends with a plan. Michael Myers said it had been 3 hours since McCain's office had heard anything from Kennedy. So the advocates split up.
Proposed deal, and then Angie, Kevin, and I are about to go over to McCain's office.
The legal experts left with Esther and her staff to try to come up with a counteroffer for the Republicans. Frank, Angie, and Kevin from the Conference of Catholic Bishops are heading to McCain's office to let them know they're working on it.
Is it 4 or 2? 241?
Yes, two.
The future president has a Hello Moto cell phone.
thank you guys, thank you, bye. Call us.
Hey, Ted, how are you?
That's good. Kennedy's calling to say I want a bill. Right? Let's.
Don't give up.
Hopefully it's not too late, but Kennedy definitely wants a deal. Thanks, Brian. Take care.
The crisis brought John, Laura, and Randy to the Hill this afternoon for pretty much the same reasons as Frank and Angie and Kevin.
We're providing legal status to 12 million people under this alternative. Do you realize that?
It's unbelievable.
That's the response.
It's not a flood on the new worker program. It's
11.
It's a way of
But the
treating
way the
lazy
Republicans
people.
will talk about it is that they're coming in under the worker program.
Well, that's
They-
fine. I mean, that's how they
but
have to talk
then
about
the
it.
Democrats are put in a squeeze because the way it's going to be perceived
What
is that
works
they're
for
letting
Republicans
in.
doesn't work.
And the
Democrats.
AFL is going to go.
And what would work for the Democrats is to put these people at the very end of the line, with people who are longer
Legalization,
than 5 years.
which
Put them at
doesn't
the
work for
end of the
Republicans.
legalization line. But they're
That
saying
doesn't
no
work
way.
for Republicans.
Right. That's
It's not a matter of
point.
facts.
Point
It's a
is,
matter of
there's
optics.
this perception of a 3 million guest worker program, which the
Well, we'll make
Democrats-
charts that make, this is
Yes.
the red chart and this
Oh, I
is
haven't
the blue
done a chart
chart.
in a day or two.
But if we can call it something different,
Or I'm going to do another chart.
and make something easier for them, or something different for them. Something
But I mean,
Something else. An
if you're saying it's kind
I like
of a
hers.
silly issue because it's more optic than
It is,
real,
it is.
that's true. But it could put Reid and Schumer and these other guys in a position to say, oh, Ted Kennedy's come back with a deal where we have now 3 million more guest workers.
But they're not. They're already here, and we're giving them legal status that they're not going to have now.
Yeah, they're here. This is a program.
You know that we
We're
understand.
well aware
Yes,
of
yeah,
that. We're with this program.
Not long after Frank and Angie leave McCain's office, Esther's about to send a new offer to Becky.
They're going to reject this looking at it.
You're going to reject it, you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Martinez is the people, Becky says they're Doug. Yeah.
Right. Big funnel, small spigot, so that's the problem. And then when you describe the so we're like,
Frank was optimistic on the deal or no?
no, this was before. Yes, that's what I corrected.
I mean, this is the best that there is right now. But I just don't think they're going to take
My
it.
situation is,
Hi, Mike.
I've got, how are you? Got McCain sitting at his desk, and Kennedy promised him 10 minutes ago we'd have something to McCain in half an hour, so we got 20 minutes left.
McCain?
to get something to McCain.
So you unplug the clock? Good.
It's midnight.
They got stuck on daylights. When daylight savings changes, it's never recovered.
Would you like us to leave?
Yeah,
No,
but
it
guys,
can't
we're here
be
to help
easy.
if we can or leave it.
But you want me to
Esther,
or
maybe
talk
you
to
should-
Nilda?
Yeah, I mean, if
Is
you're
that
going
more
to-
helpful than talking
Yeah.
to Becky?
Yeah.
Talking to Nilda and
Yeah,
Jill?
yeah.
Okay.
So Ewick is dispatched to Martina's office to find out whether they can be a little bit more flexible on this deal. And Esther keeps on working.
Hey. Yeah.
Oh, Senate approves 3 million new guest workers on top of 400,000 a year. I mean, literally, that's what they're spooked by. It's not the AFL. It's the argument against guest workers on the left, which is punishing us. We've been losing it. Because it's about guest workers, not about a path to citizenship. I mean, isn't this ridiculous that, this is a legalization program for 3 million people here, and the problem
but
is
not
that they're going to be called temporary
200.
workers or guest workers by the stupid press and the stupider constituency groups?
It just sounded strange to me. I was told that you guys had agreed to this, and it
That's
just.
what it's down to.
Yeah, no, okay, well, that's,
I think it's really, look,
okay. That's why I'm calling the source.
So you're creating this prioritization process 10 years hence.
Right out of there and file some motion on that.
Yeah. Gives the
5
11.
minutes before that clock has messed me up all week.
She said, I can tell you it's not looking good.
She said she saw
Becky knows this stuff.
just
She
doesn't
really
like
does. She doesn't like it, yeah. Huh?
You sure?
Oh, I'm positive.
No other options would need to be.
The other thing was what I, had suggested to the senator earlier, where we have them come back under the McCain-Kennedy Independent Worker Visa program, a modified McCain-Kennedy Independent Worker Visa program. But it's still a temporary worker program. Yeah, it's a new and improved temporary worker program, but it's still a temporary worker program.
Is there some way to recraft that independent worker thing?
That's what I'm looking
kind of
for right now.
optically to make it.
Why doesn't Danny Sepulveda's suggestion where we bring them in as temporary workers and in exchange we have fewer future flow temporary workers? Because apparently business has signed off on that.
That's a great idea.
It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's the start of a really new offer. The idea is that the Democrats and Labor will accept the sliver, the 3 million undocumented already here, being called temporary workers, if the number of visas for actual new temporary workers is cut back from the current offer of 400,000.
So what should we, 200?
250.
250?
What do you think, Esther, if you don't think that's...
Yeah, no, I mean, it just, I think they would accept it.
McCain would?
Yeah. Becky, we have another idea. Okay, how about if...
Eventually, pizza arrived. There were dozens more calls. As everybody waited into the wee hours of the morning
Everybody understands?
to see if the new idea was good enough to be called a breakthrough. Well, I hope that was comprehensible. It was really throwing you into the deep end, but it kind of gives an idea of what's involved, in finding a compromise, how incredibly delicate it can be. And business and labor and the Democrats and the Republicans all have to be happy. The next selection is from the following film, from the 12th from 2007. And in 2006, the bill that we just saw them working on did pass the Senate. In 2000, but never the House. So there are high expectations in many quarters that in 2007 it's going to sail through. But things didn't turn out that way. It was a very different context. Senator McCain was by then running for president, so he was no longer Kennedy's partner. And instead, it was Senator John Kyle. And the whole environment was very different. at the time this excerpt begins, secret negotiations have been going on behind closed doors between Senate staff, of course, but also senators and White House people, cabinet secretaries even. And everybody else is closed out, and they're growing very, very nervous. What kind of deal is getting made in there, particularly the advocates? So that's where this excerpt begins. Frank's not in the room when Esther and Kennedy are negotiating, but he does have a back channel to the White House. The White House wants his support because he's influential with the press and other advocates. And that's giving Frank an opening to try to help Kennedy get a better deal.
Because of the moves you've made today, I actually think we're closer.
Do we get any credit for the moves we
get
today, or is it just, more?
No, you won the first 23 battles, and you just want to win the last 7. At least 5 of the last 7. You were kicking our ass from one end of the negotiation to the other, and now it's getting serious, and we're trying to get to a deal where it's sustained.
The White House and Senator Kyle want to change the immigration system in ways that Frank hates. Their big new idea is a point system that determines what kind of person gets a green card to stay in the U.S. There's a list of high-demand professions, but the point system seems tipped against low-skilled workers.
When you look at the projections of the top 10 occupations, I'm telling you, nurses are in there.
Yes, I know.
Right? They're at the top of the list or close to it, and teachers and stuff like that, but most of them are service jobs, janitors, hospitality workers. I mean, so if that's the economic need, and we're going to an economic need-based system, is it that we just don't like Mexicans, so we're not going to let them in? That's what honestly, that's what it fucking sounds like, and that's what it's going to look like. Honestly, you get into a debate on, we want the best and the brightest, but not the hard-working folks. I mean, Barney Frank used to say something, and I'm sure he's not your favorite Democrat, or favorite politician, but he used to say something that a lot of politicians are going to make speeches. You know what they're going to say? They're going to say, I'm not going to be for an immigration policy that would have kept my grandparents out. Under this, when I look at the point system you have, honestly, I see every English-speaking educated person in the world going, hey, I got a shot at America.
It could be a visa line that's millions and millions of people long, filled with people who have no connection to the United States at all. While, as a U.S. citizen, I wouldn't have the capacity to bring my sister or my daughter if she was an adult. The implications of that are staggering, both for people's families, but also there are real ethnic and class implications to this point system the White House is proposing. All of Europe would qualify under this point system, and probably, a third of India and other parts of Asia, but not Africa and not Latin America.
Early this morning, a few key advocates got a call from Senator Kennedy's office, asking them to come to the Hill to brainstorm about the point system. They're hoping they can influence Kennedy's negotiations.
Is there some way to approach this just as a negotiating tactic where you start with the points and say these are the points, but then to really make this work, you got to have these numbers so you're not leading with,
Yes.
We need
you
300.
could do that.
It's just how we did it. But why don't we talk about the points?
The categories that we laid out for the senator, having an existing temporary visa, we said that's the most important factor, would be 25 points. Having a job offer from an employer, we're saying 20. Being in a high-demand occupation, which gets you a lot of the service occupations that we're after, it would be 20. Being a son or daughter of a USC, 20. Being a sibling, 10.
It's just the numbers.
What you're outlining here is the makings of a Kennedy bill and not something that they're so far away from this. Yeah. I think the minute I start explaining this, they get up and walk again.
So she needs to just keep the conversation going without inciting a blow.
Right.
So that's what we should be feeding her.
Yeah, instead of what we're talking about, which is the Kennedy bill.
That's right. All right, so what can we give her that helps her do that? That's a different list.
Ted Kennedy was 33 years old when he managed his first bill on the floor of the U.S. Senate. The bill became a landmark law, known as the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. It repealed the old national origins quotas that favored Europeans for a new system based on family reunification and skills. And it changed the face of immigration and the country profoundly. The law made us a multi-ethnic, multicultural society.
You said if the worker is out of job for 45 days, then he has
42 years later, Senator Kyle and the White House are asking Ted Kennedy to trade that away.
green cards or green card status, that's no longer true.
Their offer in return is the safety of the 12 million immigrants living here illegally and under threat of deportation.
That the person who came here illegally,
Legalization in exchange for the heart of Kennedy's 65 Act.
Senator, good to see you. Nice to see
Short
you.
notice. Thank you, my friends. Good to see you all. Nice one. Nice go. This one? You're going to tell another guy? Kevin's got one.
The strategy has to be is to keep the Republicans in, and keep them in, probably you have to keep talking.
We don't want to be coy about it. I think, at least for my organization, we want a deal.
Yeah.
But it's got to be good enough where we can look people in the eye and say we stand by it.
Well, I think probably we ought to keep it rolling.
This is all happening in the back room. We can't really present the evidence that this is what they're proposing. But especially since what they're proposing is that Ted Kennedy sign on to this. He's the author of the 65 Act. You know, he can't possibly sign on to a system that is based on race and class. He can't.
If you have family and economic need, and you have merit, not points.
Frank is really reaching for a deal, more than any of the rest of us.
Because he wants temporary, means temporary.
There's folks who are in the room and folks who are not in the room. And Frank is like the ultimate symbol of people who are in the room.
Might be good enough to start.
All people know is that there's a negotiation going on that makes them sick to their stomachs, and Frank is as close to being in the room as you could be.
Man, that one-year wait, this is so fucking stupid, Barry. Come on. Why do you want trained workers to leave the economy for a year?
Okay, look, if it was me doing this, if it was the president by himself doing this, you heard us. I got to deal with, I got to play the cards I'm dealt here.
You are radically restructuring immigration into the United States. Radically.
Yes, that part is true.
All right, so you know, yes, you're taking care of the folks here and most of the backlog, not all of it, but we'll win that on the floor. You know, but you got to have a functional system going forward, and you got to have a functional system that's considered fair.
They want a deal so bad. They've moved like 40 yards in 3 days. They thought they could jam Kennedy into the bad deal. It's still not a great deal, but it's a deal good enough to start.
Not everyone agrees with Frank, but after 11 weeks, Kennedy's close to a deal with Kyle.
We're gonna get a lot of calls. There's a lot of angry people. And I think what we need to tell them is that we're trying to improve the bill as much as possible at this stage, but the goal is to get the bill to the floor so people can then form coalitions to try to improve it on the floor.
Is there any talk of extending floor debates after the recess?
No, not yet. I mean, I think there's a real interest in finishing the bill at the end of next week. And
One
just
way or the other.
One way or another, limiting number of amendments if we have to get on the bill and get off it as quickly as possible.
That's good. Yeah. I like that strategy.
Well, I mean, the longer it drags out, the more we get subjected
To attacks.
Yeah.
When will you find out from the groups whether or not they support the process moving forward?
I don't know. I don't think they are. I mean, let's just be honest.
Well, if they come out against it, I mean, is it too late, or if they came out universally against, would Kennedy back out at that point?
I don't know. I have a feeling no. I think he still thinks that we're better off moving forward and seeing what happens on the floor. And if it becomes a real disaster on the floor, then you pull the plug and you pull the bill. Yeah. But I think with very few exceptions, I think most of them are not going to like this.
It's so funny to see so many people here who remember that from real life. We thought it was a good example of how important a role all the stakeholders play. They're not always in the room, but they always have influence in one way or another, and maybe we can talk about that later. The last excerpt is also from 2007, and the bill has made it to the floor. They got a deal, and the bill goes to the floor. It's pretty rough going right away, and every day that passes, they're losing support. So Senator Reid decides to call for cloture, and there's massive resistance from the Republicans, but also from Senator Kyle and Senator Kennedy as well. So that's where this excerpt begins.
I'm not going to be for a bunch of amendments get thrown up here and voted on where we have no time to actually know what's in them.
Opposition senators filibuster all afternoon.
I had indicated to my good friend, the majority leader,
Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans, asks his counterpart, Harry Reid, the majority leader, for more time for amendments.
They want these amendments, but don't allow us to call them up.
Senator Kennedy thinks that with more time, the opposition will weaken.
There come the end of the day.
But Senator Reid says no.
We didn't get any more amendments.
And cloture, which takes 60 votes to pass, remains scheduled for 7:30.
Once Reid says no, the Republicans have to decide. Agree to cloture and let the bill move forward toward a final vote. Or vote in solidarity with the senator's right to debate and defeat cloture. Usually, a defeat on cloture is the end of the bill.
The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Allard. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Bai. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Biden. Mr.
The end is
Bingaman.
sudden and unexpected.
On this vote, the yeas are 45, the nays are 50. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative, the motion is not agreed to.
Mr. President.
Majority
All
Leader.
but one of the Republicans voted against cloture. The Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, voted against it. And so did Senator Kyle.
This was perhaps the most difficult vote I've ever cast in the Senate. Because on the one hand, I'm trying to protect conservatives' right to offer amendments that they believe will improve the bill. Amendments which, as an advocate for the bill, I know are going to be very difficult to deal with. But at the end of the day, I mean, this question really should go to Senator Kennedy. He could tell you stories for the next 3 hours about his experience here. You're always better off giving senators an opportunity to have their say, to offer a reasonable number of reasonable amendments. At the end of the day, the legislative process usually works out best when they've had that opportunity.
His remarks were great. Yeah.
Good morning, good morning. instead of be better. But as I sit over there, I sit over there at our press conference. I remember the 1967 Red Sox team. The impossible dream. Way behind in August and won the division.
What happened in the World Series in that year?
Well, if you don't got to get the World Series, I knew you'd have a hot shot.
I love them nonetheless.
Actually, the last, I remember going upstairs. Although this is all, it was a great time, great series. So, anyway, many thanks to all of you. First of all, I think Esther and our wonderful staff. That's sessions. Sorry, that's Lord. I don't know how we're going to sleep at night without seeing or hearing. We're going to try to. I mentioned over at the press conference, this place is a very chemical place. I mean, people don't. You read all you want about the Senate, and it's rare that people sort of capture the time. And there's a rhythm to this place, and there's an ebb and flow in terms of when things are possible, and then suddenly, you know, the sort of stars come in line when things are right, and you get some results on it. And you can't manufacture that time, and you have to have a lot of patience, but it can't be open-ended. It's easy to get the gear stuck. My sense is that this is, as all of you understand very well, sort of a continuing process, and that's what we're in for. So
well, Senator Kennedy, I would not normally take the liberty of attempting to speak for anybody in this room, but I think I can say safely, look, thank you for your leadership and your commitment to this issue, and for the extraordinary work that you have put in over the last years. And I just think on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you.
We're all interested is keep moving this process, and then until we finally take a look at it. And at the end of the day, if it's a clunker, it's not going to go. And but I think without doing this and without keeping after it, then you know we're behind the curve. Well, listen, thank you. Thanks very much. You know, good to come on up, and we'll be back at it again. Thanks very much.
To the whole team.
Thank you. Great team. Good to see you, my friend.
Appreciate it.
Good. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
And these guys missed you.
Yeah, they had it. Look at those little faces. Good to see you, my friends. Thanks a lot. All right, good to see you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I saw you on Spanish television. You were on this morning. Weren't you on?
You're watching Spanish television?
Yeah, I was watching this. No,
criticized that Kennedy didn't deliver.
Thank you. Thanks an awful lot. Thank you. Thanks, Amelia. See you. Thank you.
Thanks. But the question is this: if you had a crystal ball and could predict what will happen over the next 2 years, what is your assessment? You see, here's my thing. The raids yesterday,
They're just going to get worse and worse and
it's
worse.
open season on Hispanics.
Exactly.
Let me just make that clear so that we don't have any
only going to get worse.
It's going to get a lot worse. And the issue is going to be whether you can even hold a comprehensive bill together, because enforcement is on the ascendancy. Everybody thinks that enforcement is necessary.
Right.
You're about to get
It's not a bill or no bill. It's a bill or enforcement only.
That's right. So you're going to get a big dose of enforcement. And you did talk to Chris Lasser in Menendez's office. Menendez was there on the votes. He was helpful. I know he's been out of shape, but we just can't have him as an outlier.
Maybe they can get this bill back. To convince Majority Leader Reid to try again, they'll have to find a formula to control amendments and undo some of the damage from the last couple of days.
So now I'd like to bring everybody up, our filmmakers, including Esther. And thank you so much for these great clips and for the description. I want to briefly introduce Esther, who I didn't introduce before. In addition to being a movie star, it's hard to find somebody more knowledgeable about these negotiations than Esther in America. Born in Havana, she started her career in immigration law in Florida, and between 1998 and 2007, she was chief immigration counsel to Ted Kennedy on the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee, so involved not only with this entire process, but also Ag Jobs and DREAM Act and every other immigration legislation proposed during those years. So I would like take a seat, ask one question to start a discussion, and after that I'd like to bring it to you guys, because we have some extremely knowledgeable people in the room as well. So I, against all odds, am optimistic, and the reason is from a personal experience I had recently, which regards Haiti. I said I would discuss this a little bit later. Here at CGD, we last year, through some of our research, we identified the inclusion of Haiti in eligibility for the country's largest temporary worker program, the H-2 visa, as one of the cheapest and most effective things that the United States could do to assist Haiti after its earthquake. Here again, the tough blending of these two very different worlds. And we talked to much of the Florida congressional delegation, also representatives of New York and Massachusetts, in all of which places many Haitians live, people throughout the State Department, Homeland Security, the White House, many NGOs, and I was surprised and pleased to discover bipartisan support for things that make sense, even in this area. When we started out to change that particular policy, the exclusion of Haiti from eligibility for the country's largest temporary worker program in the face of Haiti's disaster, no matter how senseless that seemed to me, there were people telling me, you know, especially coming up to an election, anything involving lots of poor black people and immigration is not something anybody's going to want to touch, so don't bother. We ended up getting a strong letter of support from a bipartisan group of 8 senators and congressional representatives from Florida, among support in many other quarters, some of it behind the scenes. And last week they changed the policy. They green-lighted Haiti for these visas, something that's going to unlock, according to our research, hundreds of millions of dollars in benefits for Haiti. Something that makes sense, something that when you could sit down and talk with people about it, people were willing to make sensible, pragmatic compromises. So just a tiny little corner of the issue, but it was really inspiring to me to sit in rooms with people across the political spectrum and see room for sensible compromise about specific issues in a pragmatic way. All of that as an introduction to bringing back my question from the beginning of this session, which is you guys started working on this in 2001. You were working on in the auspicious month of September 2001, when the outlook for possibility of change suddenly shifted. And here we are in 2012, somewhere where I'd like to hear, but perhaps you never thought we'd arrive at this point after so many years. And there have been a lot of false hopes. Here I am with my naive hopes for the future. And what I would like to know is, from your perspective, after having observed this process for so long, what the people in this room who would like progress in the next, let's say, few years could learn from the experiences that you saw. If I came away from tonight knowing, as I said before, one thing that a successful future compromise effort, compromising across the political spectrum, would need to include, or maybe one thing that it would definitely have to exclude, I would really feel like I learned a lot tonight. And I would love to know your thoughts. And since we haven't heard from Esther yet, I would love to go to Esther first and then bring it back to our filmmakers. Thank you.
Sure. Let me preface this by saying that I'm here in my personal capacity, speaking as a former congressional staffer, so the views I'm expressing are my own. I think that two key things that you said with respect to the Haiti issue that are key. One is bipartisanship. You need bipartisanship to do anything in the Congress, or almost anything in the Congress, and you certainly need it in the context of immigration. All of the bills that we have seen in the past that have been successful, all the efforts that we have made in the past that have been successful have involved bipartisanship, and that's something that just doesn't exist right now. There aren't a group of members, Republicans and Democrats, willing to come together on just about anything, but much less immigration. The other piece is compromise. You need to have people that are willing to sit down and make some difficult decisions. No one gets everything they want. And I think that these clips show how difficult the compromises can be. For Senator Kennedy, it was an ultimate compromise, sacrifice that he had to make to give up to go back on the 1965 Act. But he thought that the most important thing was that we would move forward on legislation and we would get legal status from some 12 million people, and we would do away with the current family visa backlogs that are horrendous. And he was willing to make that compromise and live to fight another day and try to fix other parts of the bill that weren't so good down the road. And that just doesn't exist. And then the other thing is you need a champion. And in the situation in Haiti, you were able to find a group, probably the South Florida delegation, I'm guessing. But you need to have champions that are willing to take this on. And without that, you're not going to get anywhere.
Michael and Shari, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
John, as he came in, said, well, you have to be, I think it's a 3/4 full glass if you're going to work in this town. So I think, there's everyone that we filmed was fighting through this whole almost a decade with optimism. And I don't know how people feel individually at the moment. I think we came away feeling really inspired by the system, and I think are still optimistic, having seen the pieces of this. I hope that these films are really useful to new people coming in to the conversation, to office, to new staffers, because we think there's some lessons here that aren't necessarily obvious. Bipartisan means something. Bipartisan means, for many advocates, you have to figure out, why is this good for the Republican Party? That's what that's a requirement of comprehensive immigration reform. There's business and there's labor, but it isn't, none of these groups, not the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party, there are no monoliths in something as big as this. So that, in late in the negotiations, Randy or any of the other leaders in the business community know that there are some business folks for whom the deal isn't so great, and they have to deal with it. And the same was true for the advocates, and the same was true for, the people who own this building. So all that still, I think they got close several times, and I think we're still pretty optimistic.
Can I just say that Michael's comment reminds me of Oliver Wendell Holmes' definition of government, which is the art of so ordering human affairs that action in the self-interest serves the cause of justice. Shari.
That's a great quote. And it's actually, the question you posed is a great question. I think a lot of people in this room talk about this question every time we get together. It often turns into a conversation about the immediate situation and the most current players, but in fact it's a subject that just doesn't go away, and it's nice to think about it in more abstract terms. I think it's very useful to think about it in more abstract terms from time to time. Esther and Michael may have named just about all the essentials. There's one piece though that I think we don't really show very much in the series, but it's also critical, and that's the press and public understanding. Right now, it seems like when I talk to people who aren't involved in immigration,
they just have the impression it's too complicated. They just don't yet have a gut instinct about why reform is a good idea, and I think that's a critical piece that will contribute to political will, and every player seeing that it's a good idea. So that's the only thing I can think of to add.
Thank you so much. I have a lot of other questions, but I want to get to you guys. We have a couple of microphones, is that right? Where are our roving mics? Teju has one in the back, and Denis Han has one as well. And if you raise your hand, let us know who you are, end it with a question mark within 1 or 2 minutes, that would be great. Comments from our movie stars are also very welcome. I see one back there. Denis-san.
Hello, my name is Ilana Aleze, and currently I'm interning for immigration equality. And I had a question because I'm kind of new to the political sphere, and I think that, I'm asking because it seemed like you're open. Hello? Oh, yeah. That you seem that you're, like, this movie was open to educate people who are new to the political sphere, new to the dynamics that play out. So my question is that you commented that you feel really inspired by what you witnessed and the negotiations that went down, but I feel like if you just go down McPherson Square or like other movements, you feel a lot of discontent with what's happening in the political sphere, and I just wanted to get your feedback about it. If because if you look at this room, it's mainly very well educated, not too many minorities, like that sort of thing, who can understand and appreciate what's going on in your movie. But what about for the average person? How does that translate, and how, other than, if you could put your thoughts and comments onto that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. For everybody, no? You're asking everybody. Yes, please. Any thoughts?
It is an incredibly hard game, democracy. It's unbelievable. I mean, we were stunned when we came in how hard people work, how difficult it is to do this thing. But it's, 25-year-old kids come into this town and they write the laws of the land. It's really true. And if you see some of the other films, there are some very young people in very serious roles. Glibly, I would say, look, every dollar and every vote that turns up in Washington has a voice. And so it's easy to get cynical because there are a lot of dollars. Probably fewer in immigration than in some other issues. I think that's our interest. We think that if you're a smart young person, you ought to feel from looking at these films, I could do that. I could be there. I could take part in that process. But that it isn't particularly simple or easy. On the other hand, all the parts of the process are part of the process. The people who are angry and storm the gates make a difference. And there's a year in which the demonstrations in the streets were at the right moment, and they were the wind at her back. And there were, in this scene where Senator Kennedy's in the checkered shirt, he reminisces about the demonstrations the previous year and wishes that the community was able to mobilize quickly. And they didn't, and that's part of why the bill died that year. So all the I think all the ways in which you could get engaged in the political process work, but it's important to get that people work for 6-10 years to pass one good piece of legislation.
Sorry to.
So, please, go ahead. Danny-san will bring the microphone.
My name is Robin Lieberman. I'm with Human Rights First. You notice that one of the elements you say of good advocacy is, of course, developing champions, and there isn't going to be another Senator Kennedy. He was irreplaceable, but we still are trying to develop champions, and I'm wondering if you have comments about how we can be doing that and which directions we should be headed in.
Well, I think it's a question of, there are a lot of new members of Congress. Every time I look at the chart, there are a lot of members. I have no idea who they are. So I think it's a question of sitting down with them, talking to them about the issues. And immigration is an issue that's not going to come naturally to many people, but I think once you start talking to them and talking to them about how important it is for their state and for the country, you may be able then to find champions here and there. I don't know that there will be another Senator Kennedy, but I am optimistic that there are members that are still there and new members that have come on board who will see this as an important issue. If I could go back to this other question too, about the films, and I think that the beauty of the films, and I encourage you guys to see as many of them as possible, because they really do a phenomenal job of showing how difficult the legislative process is, but that it can work, and there are earlier films about bills that do pass. Yes, it does happen. So it's definitely worthwhile, but it also shows, yes, how difficult it is and how sometimes it takes years and years. And the 2007 film ends with a speech delivered by Senator Kennedy on the floor after the immigration bill has died. And it's a very inspirational speech, and I encourage you to Google it. And he talks about the civil rights movement and how long it took to get the 64 Act done, and how anything that is worthwhile takes a long time to do, and it takes commitment, but it does happen. And he says the Senate was formed to look at and deal with difficult problems, and we failed today, but we'll come back again.
Please.
And just to add one tiny thing, I know I sound like a complete crank when I get on this subject, and Michael's probably going to be horribly embarrassed, but we didn't know a thing about this process when we arrived in this town. It didn't take long to completely fall in love with its complexity and the nature of luck as well as skill. But I find that over the years I've grown more and more impatient with other Americans that I meet who not only aren't happy with it, but know nothing about it and don't do anything about that. Government is at the bottom of every list of popular subjects in education, and yet we're unhappy with how things work. It's so responsive. All you have to do is know enough to make your input count, and it is responsive. That was actually, it's one of the truths of the series. The anti-immigration forces, the restrictionist forces, grew in strength and number over the years we were filming, much faster than the pro-immigration forces. And in fact, they, in the end, stopped things from going forward. You can't say that's not democracy working. It's not working the way I wish it would, but it is working. That's so I feel like it's our responsibility, each one of us, to understand the system better if we're dissatisfied with it.
Thank you. I see Lawrence, please.
Lawrence McDonald, Center for Global Development. Well, thank you for organizing this, and thank you for the film. It's terrific. I wanted to respond to your most recent comment about, in the case of immigration, it was the anti-reform component that grew more strongly and ultimately prevailed. And I don't doubt that that's true. But it seems to me that that may be an exception to the rule, in that, as I think you mentioned, the role of money in migration is relatively smaller than in some other issues. And if we look at some really other big pressing issues like financial regulatory reform, climate change, healthcare reform, to name just the three big national issues, in each case you have very powerful vested moneyed interests that are particularly on one side, and they use their money to shape public debate and public perception. So I think there's, if you look at the polling, very strong consensus that the lax financial regulation led to the crash, and that we should do a better job regulating. And yet when we actually get around to regulating, Wall Street guts that and shapes a kind of counter-narrative that says, oh, well, it was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and it really wasn't a problem of lax regulation of the private sector. And similarly, of course, in climate, you have massive spending, hundreds of millions of dollars, to create, really out of nothing, a climate skeptic voice. And we saw, of course, the gutting of healthcare reform by vested interests, mostly the insurance companies in that case. So I'm a little concerned that the lessons that you drew from migration for your massive investment of years of effort are perhaps naive relative to the challenges that we face in other important sectors where there is a disproportionate role of vested interest money that is interested in the welfare of that money. And that it's not, as you would seem to like to suggest to us, that migration, the democracy is somehow working and there's this ebb and flow and it's up to people to organize around their views. I think that, frankly, the public good is very often outgunned, and that migration may be the exception to that.
Why are we not cynical, given that in many of these subjects, money is a powerful force? We've seen that, in fact, citizen calls, group pressure does have a force. That there was no countervailing force. Well, no, it's not true. It wasn't money in the case of immigration. It was well-organized restrictionist organizations with pretty deep pockets. So I think actually there are lessons. If you were interested in the next big fight over the environment, I think there's some lessons there. The simple answer, this seems too difficult, all those are techniques that applied in immigration and then that apply whenever you're trying to stop a bill. It's easier to stop a bill than to create one.
Please go ahead. Can we bring Teju will bring it in 1 second.
Hi, Mark Rosenblum, Congressional Research Service. So thank you for the film. That's really fun. That was fun to watch for all of us, I think. I just had sort of a comment, and to turn it back to Michael's opening question a little bit, and the comment being that if we imagine coming back to this issue in the next few years in a serious way, that I'm struck by the number of things that are very different than they were in 2006 and the number of things that are not different, and among the things that are different are what the enforcement landscape looks like, and including a lot of the things that the tough enforcement measures that were part of some of those bills and part of the conversation then, that many of them have been implemented now, and that net unauthorized immigration into the U.S. has been zero for the last few years, and we actually see that where we had 12 million unauthorized immigrants in the U.S., now we have 11 million. And then also that, obviously the economic downturn, and those three things are all related to each other. And then on the other hand, that we still have 11 million unauthorized immigrants, and that the visa systems in place still don't necessarily match very well either to family demands or business demands. So, as we think about that, and then also, the huge different context is that those groups that you were just talking about are will be starting the next conversation in a different place than they did in 2006. So I just wondered, how that different context might shape, what a legislative deal might look like, and just to comment a little bit on that different context.
I can start. I think whatever bill gets put together in the future, and I'm optimistic that something will get put together, it won't look like the efforts that were made in the past. I mean, 2006 didn't look like 2007, and whatever gets done next is not, and in part for the reasons that you have given. But I think there are lots of opportunities because of all the changes that have taken place. Yes, the border is much more secure now than it's been, and certainly than it was in 2006 and 2007. But there will always be an enforcement component, I think, to any bill, and it's a question of seeing then what is it that is needed, and what is it that certain members have identified that they want. We'll have to look at how the economy is doing, and then the role of the temporary worker program, and whether it's going to be a temporary worker program, a provisional worker program, or more permanent visas and so forth. But I think that's still going to be a component. And then the 12 million haven't, well, they've been reduced a little bit, but they haven't gone away. I think it's again sitting down with stakeholders, having them identify what the needs are out there, and sitting down with members and the administration to see what are the key provisions. And in the end, it takes segments of each of these things, and so I think that part of it is still the same, that you're not going to have something that will only look at only one aspect of the problem. It's going to require that we look at all aspects of the problem together.
You know, we started because it seemed beautiful to us in our naive beginning that there was an idea. There's a problem. There's a misfit between the visa system and the undocumented, or proof that the visa system doesn't work. We haven't really thought about globalization, and here's an idea. We'll fix this. And the journey of this, this idea, which the more you thought about it, the more you realized it had to be enormously complex, and deal with contradictory desires. SEIU is not the AFL, just to start with one big division. I'm sure that kind of journey happens with a lot of different pieces of legislation, and maybe we're naive because this was the idea originally. But I think Esther has said it's got to have future flow, it's got to deal with people who are here, it's got to have credible enforcement, it's got to have a revised visa system that has some reflection of economic need. Those were the ideas, back then. So
yeah, the strategic fight was always, would it be piecemeal or would it be one big comprehensive arrangement? And that conversation may go on again depending on what's possible. I haven't seen any evidence that the piecemeal pieces are really that much easier, but there's always an argument, a good argument, that each one has particular merits. You know this better than I do.
Can I just clarify one thing? I've been very interested in that debate of comprehensive versus piecemeal. And Esther, if I understood you correctly, and please correct me if I didn't, at least to some substantial extent, it seems to me what you're saying is that the kind of backroom horse trading that needs to happen implies that there is no strictly piecemeal solution, that cannot happen. Is that a correct interpretation?
I think that's correct. I don't see piecemeal happening, because in the end, let's just take the Senate. The magic number is 60. You need 60 members to support a bill. And you're not going to get 60 members that are just going to support a DREAM Act, or 60 members that are just going to support an ag jobs bill, or 60 members that are going to support changes to family immigration reform, much less a legalization program, much less enforcement only. So you have to bring together all of the people that want something in a room and see if all of them can agree on what that bigger something is, and each of them get something out of the deal, because otherwise they're not going to support the deal.
Yeah, David Smith. I'd like to see if you want to explore the question of why the immigration debate is so dominated by illegals, most of whom, by the way, entered the country legally. When we're faced with a tremendous demographic distortion in the U.S. right now, which begs for an expansion of the work age population who are taxpayers, and which isn't going to be solved by the birth rate. In fact, the birth rate is making it worse. Why isn't the debate framed in a larger way?
You should see some of the early films in this series, by the way, the two Brownback films, when Sam Brownback was a supporter. There's a civic religion out there in the country, and it's obeying the law. And there are people who are being profoundly offended that people are breaking the law, that people I don't know are kind of getting a special dispensation, is an emotion that's real and that grew and that was exploitable. And I mean, this is my own take. This isn't in the movies, and I don't know that you'd find this. I think when restrictionists said it's about amnesty, the response, no, it's about human rights, was a fatal response. That the answer should have been, no, it's about what is the best immigration system for the United States. That's the only topic of conversation here. And the goal, in fact, was to, I think, for people who didn't want comprehensive reform, was to get the conversation not to be about that.
But it was a great political win when the anti-immigration forces settled on legality as a way to frame anything that had to do with immigration.
Name is Shane Braddock. I'm also a newbie to DC, working hard on immigration and refugee advocacy at Church World Service. And my question kind of goes along with that. It seems that you mentioned earlier, Shari, about you talking to people that might not have a gut feeling about how they feel on immigration one way or the other. And while that's certainly true, it seems that there's also people, especially far right, that have definitely made up their minds, very anti-immigrant. So my question is, how do we change that the messaging from an artistic perspective as filmmakers and from the insider perspective of a congressional staffer? How would we change the messaging towards the people who have already truly made up their gut instinct mind that this is not a good thing and that they should all go back and 12 million people should all be deported? Thanks.
In other words, does democracy work now?
Oh man, we've had a lot of conversations about that. You know, when we first started filming in 2001, we were entranced with the idea of media training and messaging and so forth. And we filmed a lot of media training. We filmed Frank doing a lot of media trainings. And one of his, he would always, early in the session, include a graph that showed that, and percentages may not be the same right now, but 10% roughly of let's say Americans are inalterably opposed to immigration. Call it 20. Okay, then 20 were very, very favorable. And that left 60 to 80 in the middle who really could go either way. Those people are the ones I was talking about. They are still, and you're never going to change. You're probably not going to change either far end, but you don't need to. What you need is in that middle part that hasn't made up their mind. I think that we didn't just film that over and over again. We saw it verified in the exposure we've had, you know, talking to people about the shows since they started being done. So I think that's an optimistic sign right there. I mean, I think the battle is there to win.
People were doing a lot of things right. I mean, the people who were fighting for reform with Kennedy and other senators, at the core of it. And they got close a couple of times, very close. And there's some stuff to talk about, and there are people in this room you should be meeting, and who will be much more eloquent and smart about that stuff. And Bush could have chosen immigration instead of Social Security as his big battle that one year, and that might have made all the difference. So there are a lot of things you have to get yourself to the place where when things align, it's possible. The interest for you guys isn't the 20% who are always going to be opposed. It's can you get more progressive members in the House next time? Those are the tools to get.
Hi, my name is Jose. As an immigrant and immigrant advocate, I'm very glad to see that some of you are very optimistic about it. But I have the question, as some independent observers might feel, the goalposts have moved. When you talk about those people in the middle that we should reach and try to influence, isn't it true that that very punitive laws and measures like Arizona 1070, Alabama's HB 56, E-Verify, all those things, and all the very powerful interests that are behind restrictionism, private prisons for profit, etc., politicians that are trading in fear in exchange for votes, they are doing such good of a job that now, even if we start thinking about a bipartisan agreement, wouldn't it start much farther towards the middle be on the restrictionist side than before?
I think any bill in the end is going to have very tough enforcement provisions. What they will look like, it's hard to say today, but you're going to have that. You don't get a compromise without it. Yeah, let me just stop there, and I'll add something later. But
You're right. It doesn't stay the same. That's one of the remarkable lessons of getting to hang out with these folks for this stretch of time. It does keep changing, and the road that our heroes took got harder and more complicated, and there's a deal of the moment, and you have to be wise about saying, okay, I take the deal. And just like the guy who could have sold Yahoo a few years ago to Microsoft, and those deals are gone. And Kennedy faced a much tougher deal in 06 than he would have in 05 and so on. And I think the folks in this room who are engaged are realists. The pressure of people who are not so realistic can be enormously useful or enormously destructive, right? That's, for kind of advocates out there who are really appalled, you can be a shoulder that helps on the inside, or you can make the deal impossible. You can be the voice that says, no, we will not take this, this is not good enough. There is no one looking at this now who would say, gosh, I'm glad we didn't take the deal.